When I was 18, I started washing dishes and running deliveries at a Chinese food restaurant in Stillwater. Part of the restaurant industry that's great is like no college degree required. It's a small, really small margin game, the business we're in. Like when I hear like a rack of glasses fall and just break, like I can't help but think $42. Money-wise, like we had a goal. We want to raise, and it sounds crazy now, $50,000. This is how much money we need to start a restaurant. Okay, we were wrong, but that's what we thought. I think if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd have been like,
the location doesn't matter. You just have to be good at what you do and people will come to you.
But then the older I get, the more I'm like, location matters like a lot. Like our cost of doing business is around $1.5 million per location.
The inflation thing's been crazy. It's like I go to McDonald's and it's like $10 for a basic meal, whereas like a couple years ago it was like $4.99 or whatever.
Somebody rings in a $10 sandwich, $1.50 goes to DoorDash. It's okay to me that wages in the kitchen and hourly employees, like those wages have gone up. Like that's okay with me. They probably should have been a little higher anyways. Like I think people probably should have been a little more used to paying a little more for something so that somebody working a job that's really hard. I know from experience, it's a very difficult job. Like they can probably make a little bit more money, you know?
Yeah.
The restaurant, like ownership groups and stuff like that it is extremely difficult to offer very many benefits. And part of that is like, you have to employ a lot of people. And like really, if they got rid of tipped wages and everybody went to $15 an hour, I mean, that's when people just need to know that like overnight, we got to be used to paying a lot more for food. That's just going to get pushed. It's like anything that's going to get pushed to the customer.
My name's Max Gagliardi, and this is Always Be Building. If you're watching this video, take a moment, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, or you can follow me on your favorite podcast app. Hope you enjoy the show. Joey, thanks for coming on the podcast. I just cracked this open right in the middle of that, so I guess we'll catch that on there. It's not a beer, it's a bubbly. Yeah, I think I bugged you about this a few times, but the main reason is like, I don't know, it seems like when there's business stuff coming up that I've gone through, I always feel like you've been a good sounding board. I know we've been in very different industries, although I have like a hospitality degree. I've never really used it, kind of maybe with the short-term rentals, but I don't know. I just feel like you're somebody that, even though it's different, like I come to you and I'm like, hey, have you guys gone through this deal? Like, what did you do for like insurance for this thing? Or like if you had this with, you bought a building or whatever it may be. So I'm glad to have you on. And for people that don't know you, just a little bit of background here and we'll kick into it.
Sure. So, and I'll echo the same sentiment that you have been a resource for me in that way too. So I really appreciate you for that. But yeah, just in the restaurant industry here in Oklahoma City in the Edmond area. And we started our first restaurant. It's called the Mule in the Plaza District in Oklahoma City off Northwest 16th Street in 2012. So we'll be coming up on, 12 years there here in September. And then we have total operating right now 4 different concepts, 2 Mule locations, a restaurant called The Press, and then we opened this past summer a restaurant called The Lookout, and that's at a municipal golf facility in Edmond called Kicking Bird.
So you've got you've had a lot of successful restaurants. We'll get into some of them and some of the nuances of what you guys have had to go through to get there. But prior to doing this, you'd been in the restaurant business. I mean, what was like what gravitated you towards doing that? And when were you like, so I'm sure it started out as just a job, right? Like when you were younger. And then when was it like, this is a career, this is like what I want to do, it's what I like doing?
So in good point, good question. I think that, so when I was 18, I started washing dishes and running deliveries at a Chinese food restaurant in Stillwater. And I joke a lot with, other people are like, I'm 20 years, no breaks. Like, this is what I have done the whole time. I think that after college in 2008, I didn't really have intentions to do this. But I did have a liberal arts degree that, during a recession didn't really have value to employers. So I just waited tables after college, managed restaurants, and then, it's one of those things where we worked at a place called The Wedge. It's still operating downtown, me and a business partner of mine, John. And we, were naive enough to believe, look at the end-of-day sales and say, well, this could be ours. Yeah. Well, that's not how it is, but I mean, that's how we thought. And so we were young and, we were 26 years old and we thought, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it now. So
a couple of things you mentioned. The first one is like this idea of picking some degree and going to get a college education. And in my undergrad, I've never really used it. I mean, I guess kind of, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. They make you pick something. And Did you have like a lot of conviction around what you were getting a degree in when you went in?
No. And I think too, it's like, that's something like, even as a parent, that like my parents advised me against doing what I did. Like they advised me against like, hey, like maybe swing into this minor or something. Don't focus just on an English degree if you're not going to teach, because I had no intention on teaching. Hindsight 2020, like I think we all would go back and figure out, I would have done hotel restaurant administration or something like that. And
would have made sense.
Sure. Right. But, I don't regret it necessarily, but I think like, a different path in college. And truthfully, like part of the restaurant industry that's great is like no college degree required. It's not, that education is not, your on the job stuff is super valuable. So
for sure. Well, you learn stuff in college I think is beyond like, ultimately you have to do. There's some good things. I'm not totally knocking on college. It's just hard for a young person to really know. The other thing you said on the young person topic is like being that naive, or being that kind of having that confidence with not really knowing how hard it really is and like what it's going to take. I mean, that's almost kind of like a proverb. It seems like in entrepreneurship, it's like you have to kind of just be overly confident, because if you knew what you knew now going in, would it have like changed anything or
no? And I think like that. So that first Mule, when we opened, like we were like very, like I was like, there's no way this fails. Like there's no way. And like everyone else was the opposite, but we were like very, like, I think it's part of it. And I do think like that's like going in young is so helpful, because really, like if it didn't work out, like the stakes weren't really that high. We would have been okay,
Yeah. I want to hear about like what went into doing the very first Mule, because I remember at that time hearing about it kind of just on the sidelines of what you guys were all working on. But the hospitality industry in general, like had working in it for those few years, did you really understand, I guess, how hard it was? Like you hear all these statistics of like this many restaurants fail in this period of time, like staffing's really hard. I mean, whatever, thing that people want to bring up about it. Were you like eyes wide open going into that, or was it just the confidence of like, we think this is going to work?
I mean, we knew, because the group that we worked for better or worse, and I honestly kind of think for better, they were like a pretty hands-off ownership group. So if you had a store, that was your store, for better or worse. If it was a successful store, they were praising you, and if it was not, you're risking your job. And I mean, obviously, like it's different because that was their money, and now it's mine. That's a wake-up call, right? Like,
right.
When it becomes your money at stake, and you're, like what you're risking becomes, it's just, and the longer you do it, the more it almost feels like the more risk, at least the way we run our operations, the more risk we can open ourselves up to financially. But I mean, we were prepared, I feel like, but again, there was a lot of stuff that, man, if anybody ate at the Mule, like the first 2 months, 3 months we were open, it was just a mess. I mean, we figured it out, obviously, but it was a mess,
The whole concept of like, it's your money and it hits different. It's so weird because like what I've noticed around running the business thing versus like my personal stuff, I'll like agonize over some, it's like, oh, I want to buy this like $300 thing, like whatever. And I'm just like, I'm not going to buy that this month. But then like in business, you'll just like have something that you spent like $5,000 on that like didn't work. Something happened and you're like, we just like ate $5,000 on that. But it's like, it's weird. Like it matters, but at the same time, you're kind of forced to like make these decisions where you have to sort of roll the dice on things and kind of live with it. I don't know. It's a weird feeling.
I think it's really well said. I like it. It's a thing, with all of us where, when we were 26, the amount of money that we talk about now in our 30s and the stuff that we spend money on or take a loss on or whatever is, again, like if we took a personal financial loss or a personal financial gain of whatever, we'd be all, either jacked up or down on ourselves. But yeah, in business, you kind of just take your licks and keep going.
You do. And then there's sometimes when somebody wastes something or you spend money on a hire or something doesn't work out, and it's like really frustrating because it is your money.
I think the older I get, I used to not like, it's a small, really small margin game, the business we're in. So I should have always been like more like worried about whatever. But like when I hear like a rack of glasses fall and just break, like I can't help but think $42.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like, and that's part of, changing our roles a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that's like part of it too.
One thing that is probably been a big contributor to your success, I'm assuming, is like the partners and the people you've surrounded yourself with. I've always said like partnerships is a massive form of leverage. It's not all on your shoulders. You have, the leverage of other people's ideas and their time. Like when you're trying to manage something, someone needs to be there. But how important, like what was the background with the partners? How important has that been to the success of it? How hard has it been to manage the relationship? Because you're obviously probably friends with them, but then you're also in business with them, but just talk about the partnership side of it.
Yeah. And with us, we were all friends previous to being in business together.
Which they say not to do.
Which they say not to do.
Right.
But again, it's this weird like trauma bonding thing where you're like, well, you're all in it together. I've known, so we have total like operating partners. There's 3 of us total, myself, Cody Rowan, John Harris. And then we have Roger Alefterakis, who is in closer to your field in oil and gas, who is really useful in some of the deals that we do and stuff like that, just because he is a CPA. He has a mind for the stuff that kind of we don't honestly have a mind for. But, Cody's background is the same as mine. I mean, he started working at Eskimo Joe's in college and then moved to Denver after he got married and worked in a restaurant there. And so he was living in Denver, and then John and I were working together. And again, I've known John since I was 14 or younger. And we were working together, and we were like, we're going to do this, but we feel like we need a third person just to kind of like, because we were going to manage and do it all. And we knew like we're going to, 2 of us in the kitchen, 1 of us in the bar, that'll be enough or whatever. And so we called Cody and we're like, hey, move here. Let's start a restaurant. And he actually did it, which thinking about now is like actually crazy to me that I'm like, I cannot believe he like moved here. Because I mean, again, we were just an idea at that point. But like, I do think that we've been lucky that business has been good. And I think when business is good, then your partnership has less stress on it.
It's easy when everything's going right.
Obviously, restaurant business saw with COVID, and we might tackle some of this stuff. Like things got chippy for sure. Like things got chippy with us. But it's like, we have it might not be the most, functional way of communicating, but we have a way of communicating where everybody kind of knows what they're expected. And we all pull our own weight, even though it's not required. It doesn't say anywhere we have to do X, Y, Z. We do it, you know, so.
Well, at least what I've found is that certain people have different strengths. They gravitate towards those. You kind of learn the quirks of the people you're working with. And it's like, all right, like this task comes up and you're like, I'm going to handle this one. Cause like, you just kind of know I'm probably the best person suited to do this thing, whether it's unspoken or whether it's like a written task. Same thing here. It's like never like a written task list. Usually it's just like, hey, like this came up, I'm gonna handle it. Cause you just have worked together. You can kind of figure out where to do it or where you need to be going, but it's a work spouse. I mean, we joke around. It's like a work spouse. I mean, you're basically kind of married to these people.
Oh yeah.
You used to play in like bands and stuff too. Kind of reminds me of that. Like a band is like you're just like having to deal with everybody's crap. People
Everybody's
showing
egos,
showing up to practice late, whatever, showing up to shows late. The starting of the Mule, I mean, just the work that had to go into that. I mean, there's the financial side, which I know you said Roger has kind of the CPA mindset, record keeping, books and all that stuff. There's the location, picking that out. There's the getting the working capital, the supplies that you need. Just some of the process of, did you sketch it on a napkin? Did you just launch in? Do you have a formal business plan?
Yeah, we did have a formal business plan for that one. That's the only one we've really done a formal business plan for. Some lenders request them, and we kind of give them to them when they need them. But that one, so like money wise, like we had a goal. We want to raise, and it sounds crazy now, $50,000. This is how much money we need to start a restaurant.
Yeah,
okay, we were wrong, but that's what we thought. And so, we made a business plan. We went to just friends and family raise is all that was. So, my mom and dad, John's mom and dad, my aunt and uncle were really helpful with us and raised the money. And then Cody's dad has a background in construction, and he actually came down and stayed like several weeks. And so we were all in there from April until September, like sun up to sundown, basically, just like putting all the wood up on the walls, building the bar, doing all that stuff, going to auctions, buying stuff on the cheap. By the time we were like operating where we should have been operating, at that time, we were probably closer to 150,000. So we probably needed another 100, but we didn't, again, a little inside, but we opened in September and we were we had fully paid all these people back, and we took them on loans, not on nobody got any equity and obviously interest. So we had paid it back by November. So it took us 2 months to pay back that 50, and then we were on our own money at that point, which is awesome. And looking back on that, that's a really big accomplishment for us and for, our company. So
was when you put this together, I mean, like you said, you probably should have had 100. I mean, what were the things where there's always unexpected stuff, especially with this first one? I mean, what was oh crap, we should have thought of that or should have budgeted this type of moments?
Any restaurant person will laugh at this. Walk-in cooler. We didn't have one. So like that is like a necessity. You have to have that for a restaurant. Like you can't just do it on reach-in coolers. That was like a big. We just didn't have one. We couldn't afford one. We're not getting one. We're just gonna do it on reach-ins. We got food every single day. It's like 6 days a week. We got food. Prep the food for the day. Wake up, do it again the next day.
Was it like a when you thought about the site? 'Cause I know that site is now moved. So
Yeah.
what were the other considerations? You're like, we like this area. It was like parking. I mean, just like occupancy, layout. I mean, were you thinking through all that stuff?
Yes and no. We were 26 and underfunded. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like whoever's willing to take a chance on you a little bit too.
Right.
Because I mean, again, like we own a couple of our properties now. Like I look at like being a landlord, if somebody was 26 coming in, like pitching a grilled cheese restaurant, like I'd be like, okay, like, let me think about it and we'll be in touch or whatever. So part of it was that district was not built up at all. Like it was, you know, I'm sure you're gonna have plenty of people who are familiar with the area listening. It was not even close to what it is now. Like it was like we were closed on Sundays because we kind of had to be, because down there like was not very safe, you know?
Well, it seems like you guys had vision in retrospect because that area's blown up.
Yeah, it's huge now. Yeah, it's great. And I mean, I think that is what we kind of like it's sometimes it's easy to pat yourself on the back and be like, smart decision there, guy. But like that one was a little bit more like stars sort of aligning and like, again, the luck of it. Cause there is some luck involved in what we do, I think. And so that like location, again, like we just couldn't, it's what we could afford and it's who would take a chance on us too, as part of that. So
how much does the location thing matter? I mean, like you guys have had one concept, I think, in a location where you've shut it down. Most of your stuff you've opened it and it's been around for a while, but like, is that just, I mean, they always play that up with restaurants and sometimes there's these like weird dead zones where you see like 10 restaurants go through. Is it really that location's bad or is that just like coincidence because people weren't good operators?
it's a great question. I think if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd have been like, location doesn't matter. You just have to be good at what you do and people will come to you. But then the older I get, the more I'm like, location matters like a lot and parking matters in this area a lot. Like you got to have parking. Like it is the biggest issue with the Plaza District. It's what needs to be fixed down there. It's like people need to park their car. Like we're not going to, like nobody's walking, nobody's riding a bike. We're going to park. I think it's important. I mean, we all know those places that have been like 8 different places in one building, but you're like, none of them were bad restaurants. Like they were decent restaurants. What happened? And so I do think that matters, you know, especially the older we get, when we look at expansion, we're like looking at like parking and like that kind of stuff, you know?
Right.
So
it's weird. No one's probably going to know this reference unless you're from here, but that spot across from like Charleston's that was like a bunch of different restaurants and then they like tore the building down. Now it's just a lot that's like for lease. My thesis there was always like, it's the opposite way of where people from Edmond would be coming traffic wise and it was miserable to make a U-turn and get in. That's just my theory. But like something as small as that, it's like just that little bit that people are like, like, do I really want to go? That's a hard part around to get around. Like I have to like U-turn there.
Well, and I think too, like, and again, we're going to be talking about the exact same area. So again, there used to be an Outback Steakhouse over there.
Yeah.
You might be talking about this place, but it's been vacant for a very long time. It's a second generation restaurant, which is like a pretty good thing in our business. Like, oh, it's already built out for a restaurant. Like, let's look at it. But I look at it, I'm like, you only come one way. Like, there's no way we're doing it. Like, I don't even know how Outback made it that long. You have to be Outback to do it, I guess, you know? But it's like, I think the same way where I'm like, you can only come one way. I'm not going to do a U-turn, you know? It's like, is people are like that. People are weird.
Yeah, there's like I'm going on tangent. There's like a Scooters or whatever coffee place that they put in over here, which is like a drive-through thing. But like the entrance to it is just like blocked from all this traffic from the new gas station. Like you can't even get in there. And I'm just like looking at it. I look at it through my window. I'm like, they're going to struggle.
Yeah.
Like,
It's weird. It's weird. People are like really weird in that way. Like they have their own little, you know, idiosyncrasies where they're like, I won't do this or I won't do that. It's weird.
Like I don't want to wait in that traffic or try to turn left there. That's a miserable place to turn left. And it's like for some reason your restaurant fails because of that.
You're right. Yeah.
What about like I think you're somebody that is a creative because you have, you know, like the music background and, do you think that like talk about the concept for the Mule and how much does like creativity play into some of these things where you get to like kind of stretch that muscle and come up with something that maybe wasn't totally unique? I mean, melts are kind of, you know, you can go to a lot of places and get a melt, but like, how much does the creativity aspect play into some of this stuff and how did you guys come up with that concept?
Yeah, so we knew we couldn't afford and didn't really know we could have like a proper like chef. And so we were like, what is a food menu we can execute? Like we can do toast without burning it. We can melt cheese. Like we can make this work. So like that's literally, and there was a place, you know, they're going to serve me papers after this, but it was called like, I don't know, Melt or something. And it was up in the north. It was in Cleveland or something. And we had looked at it and been like, that's really cool. Like we can like kind of, jump from this a little bit. And so, yeah, like that is like probably the best part of the job is experimenting with food. Like that is very fun for all of us. Like all three of us that operate, like we have a blast doing menus. Like we have a lot of fun coming up with it. And we're simple guys. And so again, our restaurants are all casual restaurants. We don't have a fine dining establishment. So it's approachable for us. It's approachable for the diner. And like, yeah, coming up with stuff like for the Mule, original Mule was like us all living or John and I lived together at the time, but like us coming over and like running through recipes and getting with our food reps that we knew and having them give us free products so we could try stuff. And, just trying different stuff. Like the best seller at the Mule is the macaroni pony. And it's macaroni and cheese and pulled pork and all on a sandwich on jalapeno cornbread. It's like that stuff like sounds kind of wild, and especially then it was like, this is not going to sell, but we'll throw it on there just in case, and that pays the bills. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I just imagine you with like headphones, like classical music or something on, like in a like top-down light in a kitchen at night, like making all these different dishes and like experimenting. And
well, the restaurant industry is not that romantic, but it's a lot of people probably picture stuff like that.
There's a movie, I think, that chef movie or something where he does that, but it does seem like that would be a fun aspect to it. And I had this later on. I was thinking about just menu construction in general. Like I remember learning about they wanted you to get down to like, margin by ingredient, margin by like obviously menu item, then like classifying them. They had like the quadrants of these ones are going to make money, like a loss. There's 4 different things where you had to kind of break your menu up. I mean, is it that scientific with you guys? Like how much do you go through with that?
Yeah, not at all. So we don't, again, like any like real restaurant operator would probably be like, why are they not doing this? We're actually trying to get better at doing this. Like that's part of like what's been our goal over the last like 2 years post COVID is just kind of like modernizing our company using better technology, better POS systems, better invoice tracking, all this stuff. We're closer than we ever have been to something like that, but we're still like, it's not measured out like that. And we try to make sure, the biggest thing we can do obviously is like charge properly for the thing that we're going to sell. And we try not to take an L anywhere if we can avoid it. And then, we have things on the menu that are like, we could probably charge less for, but we charge a little more because it sells more. And there is that kind of stuff.
The margins you mentioned, low margin business. Walk people kind of through a typical funnel. You don't have to get into super specifics, but it's like, I think it's kind of common knowledge that drinks do well. You've got other staples on the menu. Is it like you're making gross this and then 10 cents on the dollar? Is it like, obviously it depends on the different products, but like, how do you guys like, and then to dovetail that question, when you got into it where you're just like, I got to sell this many grilled cheeses to hit like this metric, or is it, I don't know, I'm just wondering for people that don't know how the margin game works in the restaurant business. Yeah.
So when we started, again, like what we pay for things now, like we've become sort of like, I think already used to it. But when we started, we had a sandwich on our menu, and I remember it. It was called the BCLT, still on the menu. It's called the BCLT. We were selling it for $7 with a side. And we looked at our lunches and we were like, all right, we need to do $1,000 in lunch business and $1,000 in dinner business. That's just to make sure that we don't, fail. And that was like our goal jumping off. Granted, not smart. We should have had loftier goals. We were doing way better. Once we opened, we were like, okay, wow, this is good. Like we're doing great. But I think like really like, and what we've kind of looked at is, and Roger's broken this down for us really well, is there is an amount of yearly income that if we can get to it, then we start to like the margin goes up quite a bit. So it's almost like this, like, it's going to like our cost of doing business is, around $1.5 million per location. So if we can get north of that, the margin sort of grows exponentially with the revenue, which is, again, like if we were better at tracking, like, oh, it's 2 ounces of, like Jimmy put 3 ounces of cheese, we got to talk to Jimmy now. Then that would be a better scenario for us. But it's like, you used to be able to Google like restaurant profit margin and it would be like 10 to 30%. I'm like, no, it used to be, but anymore, no, like 3 to 8, is what it is. And I think like, so that's like when we open a new concept, like we have to like look at it and be like, can this do, it needs to at least north of 1.5 million a year in sales. And if it can, then, we like it, obviously. And if we have to even think about it, we're kind of like, no. And that's where like location and menu pricing and stuff like that kind of gets like, we get in the weeds with that kind of stuff.
It's pretty eye-opening because the beginning example you gave where you're just somebody working somewhere and you see like these Topline numbers, you're like, oh my gosh, we sold 5K in pizzas today or whatever. It's like, but right, there's all this other stuff.
For sure.
And I mean, like if you had to bucket it, I mean, it sounds like a lot of it's probably cost of goods sold. You've got cost of goods, which is the inventory. You've probably got spoilage, stuff that's going bad. You've got, staff. Then you've got your fixed costs. What do those buckets look like? Is it in terms of percentages?
Yeah, labor. People, that's number one. Again, like those are like labor and food costs. Those are like the two things we spend the most money on. And you look at a vendor list for like a restaurant like ours, it's and again, I use this a lot with people that ask, where I'm like, we get money once a day, like money deposited in from last night. We get that the next day. Other than that, it's just money going out. Like that's it. And so we have like, we have that shop, but like, labor is our biggest. And that's the thing, again, it's like everyone knows this. And I know I'm just repeating what everybody already knows, but it's like, that's the thing that like with, inflation and post-COVID, like our labor numbers are higher than they've ever been. Some of that I think is good. But then part of that is like, you have to kind of like know that I can't charge $22 for a sandwich. I can't. I would like to, and it would probably warrant it sometimes, but I know what's going to happen if I do, and it's not going to last very long. And so, there is that. That's the weird one with us, where like we're casual. So like there's only a certain like point that we can get to where if we cross a threshold, macaroni pony's good. You're not going to pay $22 for it, and so.
The inflation thing's been crazy, and I had this on my list of stuff I wanted to talk about, but it seems like food inflation, whether that's at the grocery store or whether it's at restaurants specifically, has gone way up, and it seems to have been stickier than some other things. And, you see a lot of it on social media getting blown up. It's like I go to McDonald's and it's like $10 for a basic meal, whereas like a couple years ago it was like $4.99 or whatever. You think it's mainly the labor side of it that's driving that, or what about the food, the cost of goods side?
On our end, like food is higher. Again, food's higher on average than it's been, but like a lot of that stuff kind of leveled out a little bit on food. I do think it's mainly labor. And again, like that is the hard part about being in this business too, is like some of those things, like you think back when we opened in 2012 and like what people were working for, it's like, granted they could afford to live because it was, cheaper to live then, but
Right.
But like, it's okay to me that wages in the kitchen and hourly employees, like those wages have gone up. Like that's okay with me. They probably should have been a little higher anyways. Like I think people probably should have been a little more used to paying a little more for something so that somebody working a job that's really hard. I know from experience, it's a very difficult job. Like they can probably make a little bit more money,
Yeah.
So there's some of that stuff where like, the food stuff's kind of leveled out a little bit to where it's probably closer to what it was pre-COVID. But I do think labor's the driver on all of your price increases on the chains and the big chains and stuff like that.
So not to go political on it, but you see these, it's like a common thing that gets people up in arms is like the minimum wage type stuff. But that has like a real impact on restaurants specifically. I mean, other jobs, maybe if it's a department store or whatever, I don't know. There's other people that make minimum wage, but if like the minimum wage here went to $15 or something or $20, is that going to directly impact like the restaurant business?
It would just, it just depend. And I think that yes and no, like we're pretty close to that anyways. So like, we'd have a handful of people that would get a raise. And I think that'd be good. And, that's a hard one. Cause I think the thing that, there's in the restaurant world, there's the whole tip debate happening too.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to get into that too, but it's like, part of that is like my view when I was waiting tables was always like, this is just my space. I'm kind of renting it from this restaurant owner. I'm going to make as much money as I can. And I didn't feel as like I'm working this underpaid job. Like I was making good money. I was, in my early 20s, like walking away with like $200 something a day. And I was feeling like, oh, good day for me.
Yeah.
$200,
Yeah.
And so I think there's some mentality stuff that's kind of changing in the industry. And I do think like, I tend to think on that, like it's pretty debatable. And I think other operators would probably fight me on one side or the other, but I'm kind of like, I don't really fight that kind of stuff, especially if I can't control it. And I think honestly, the restaurant association would fight that tooth and nail on the lobbying end and stuff like that. So
the tipping thing is always, I didn't have that as a question, but it's a good topic to bring up. I mean, it always has seemed very strange because you're like, you're going so much to the patron to add this extra thing to compensate a big swath of the staff. I mean, do folks at like a casual dining restaurant, are they getting the same type of tips, or has it ever been a point of contention? Just your thoughts in general on the tipping structure.
I mean, I'm an ex-tipped employee. I know that like that offers a flexibility in life that like not a lot of other industries, have. And I think that I always loved it because I was like, okay, well, I'm going on a vacation again, early 20s. I need $1,000 for this vacation. Cool. I'm going to work like 3 doubles in a row. I'm going to make $1,000. I'm going to go on my vacation for however long I want. And then I'll come back whenever. And so there is that. And I think that that's good. The thing that I think would be helpful, and that's what's like really like hard for the restaurant, like ownership groups and stuff like that, is like, it is extremely difficult to offer very many benefits. And part of that is like, you have to employ a lot of people. And like, really, if they got rid of tipped wages and everybody went to $15 an hour, I mean, that's when people just need to know that like overnight, we got to be used to paying a lot more for food. Just because like, that's just going to get pushed. It's like anything that's going to get pushed to the customer. And I think that it would probably take something like that, like, to change it. They just need to do it if they're going to do it. That's kind of like where my head's at. But it's like, I think people would know then, like, oh, okay. But then there'd be more money out there. And in theory, I'm not an economist. I don't know if it all works out.
But you're somebody who's your boots on the ground as a business owner who sees how these things affect your prices, right? So you're at least talking to, because an economist could talk about it in the theoretical, but you're at least giving some like real knowledge on how it would impact you.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm pretty sure not. Like, I'm pretty sure if we were like, oh, we don't do tips anymore. We pay an hourly. Then I think other groups have tried that here locally. They're back to doing tip wages. Like the staff likes the tips. Like they like that they could come in and make like,
it's kind of performance based.
Right.
Mean, if you're good at what you do, I know it's not always you, it's the kitchen staff. There's a lot of things going on, but it's like sort of a red flag if somebody who's in that role that has to be performance based is like, I don't want to be based on tips, because it's like, well, are you going to work as hard? Do you care as much? Like the people that like it are probably good at what they do, and they're happy or willing to be compensated based on kind of their performance.
Certainly, and I view it like exactly like that. I view it as like good, like the people that are best at their jobs make the most money. I mean, that's just kind of how it works.
Yeah.
So.
What about the other restaurants that you've done? Some of them is it just one? Was it just Anchor Down's the only one you shut down?
Just Anchor Down. We closed. That was COVID basically, but that's like that's like one to talk about for sure, because that's like a good example of the business, and I think how most restaurant operators are like. What happened there was we sold, it was more of a bar, so we sold like 80% alcohol, 20% food there, which at the other ones it's closer to the opposite, 70-30 food, 70 on the food side, 30 on the alcohol side, sometimes even 80-20. But so we had to close that one. And so what happened there was, it's like March, 19th or 20th, we've been closed for 3 days, and all the bills from last week start coming out of our bank account, and the account just goes to zero. We're like, well, that's that, because we're not really in a position to do it. We're actually at the end of our lease term almost perfectly. So that April, we were going to decide if we're going to do another 5 years or not. So
was it 5 years?
It was 5 years, yeah.
Wow, it seems like it went quicker than it didn't seem like it was that long. It seemed like it was like 2 or 3, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we learned, again, location. This is a good location topic too, because there was in shipping containers over, in Deep Deuce and close to downtown, and it was very small. And so we found out there basically like, well, when we're busy, we're still not doing the sales we need to do to like kind of like make money here. Mm-hmm. So that place like never lost money, but it never made like, I never got paid from Anchor Down after 5 years. Yeah. So, but it never lost money. It just never made any. And then at the end, when it was time to go, like that was it. And I think a lot of restaurants are like that. We're like, you need this week's sales to cover last week's bills. A lot of them are like that. So,
what about the going with the press and your ideas there, and how that was, it was in a similar location. What did you guys think through with that? Were you worried about any cannibalization of sales being in a close proximity? Was it, hey, we already have one thing that works, why are we changing it? What were you trying to accomplish? How's it worked? And what do you like about it?
Yeah, so we were worried about like, all right, are we going to take sales from, we're a block away. Are we going to take sales from the Mule to do this? Are we going to see a dip? And we did not, which is great. And, the idea there was to do something just a little more elevated, put the foods on plates, not on trays, you know what I mean? Like just like kind of like elevate the thing, but still stick with comfort food. And honestly, like, there's one thing we've learned is like people, when they eat out, they're not always looking to eat out healthy. And, you know, we have healthy options on all of our menus, and that's something the older we get that we're prioritizing is like, we need to make sure that people can eat healthy here.
Do they do it though?
No, a lion's share of them don't. Like, they're there to
Right.
eat chicken fried steak, you know, and that's just like part of it. So they're like, you know, that was our first building purchase. And, you know, getting in there and owning a building, we just kind of wanted to see what this is like. Like, we think this is great. One, like, buy our property, you know, use the favorable SBA lending to get in there and, you know, do this thing without the investors, because we don't have any to this point. And so, you know, there we were just another idea just of what we thought the neighborhood and the area needed. So,
well, I had it as a later topic, but you mentioned it, so I'll bring it up. But basically, you have a real estate company now too, because you own the property. Is that the only building you guys own, or did you?
We bought the Mule. We moved the Mule.
That's right.
Yeah, on 16th. So now it's at 16th in Indiana. So we own that building as well.
So what has been the what's the story in terms of the look back on it? I mean, has it been a good decision? Has it been more headaches, less headaches, pros and cons with being a real estate investor with the restaurant business?
Yeah, so, you know, like the really short answer is yes to everything. It's we're very happy to have that equity, because I mean, the alternative, we all know what it is. You pay the landlord the money, landlord does it. And so we're very pleased to have the equity. Since I can't hold it in my pocket right now, it is more work, certainly, which of course it is. And, you know, when things go wrong, you call yourself on the phone and tell yourself to fix it. It's stuff like that. But, you know, specifically the press building, where we got in a lot cheaper than we did on our building that we're in the Mule, like that one we're very pleased with. The Mule one, I don't think it's going to be a bad decision no matter what, but we did pay probably higher than, you know, we would have paid, you know, years ago, I guess, probably. So, but I mean, it's more work, it's more stress, you know, like when it leaks, it's your leak. Now it's not the landlord's leak, it's your leak and all that stuff. So
Maintenance and just the upkeep you have to be almost like a facility manager on top of it instead of just calling somebody and complaining.
And you certainly, like, at least our mindset is we want to fix it. Like, we don't want to like let things go, because again, it just makes it worse and it just makes it more expensive for us, you know? So, you know, there's that.
But it is a way to build equity. And typically in the restaurant business, you hear about people selling a restaurant or selling a group of restaurants. I mean, how does people view equity? Have you guys ever thought of buying a restaurant? I mean, have you ever thought about what are the ways that we're creating like more equity value, or is that kind of the main way?
Well, so I think, you know, these are our discussions that we're kind of having now, because again, like what we do, we know is very finite. Like no restaurant stays open forever. They change ownership, whatever. Like also, there's not a lot of like, you can buy a restaurant if you want. There's not a lot of value in, you know, like how you evaluate a restaurant is not very favorable for us, you know? And so, you know, I think that like, of course we view the real estate in that way as like, all right, well, when it's all done, at least we'll have this. And then, you know, looking forward, I think like we're kind of looking at the Mule as a brand that we have 2 successful locations, and we're thinking like, all right, well, if we do a third, do we do something similar to like a flagship where we kind of come up with a formula and build the perfect Mule, and then see if that's something that we could license or franchise. That is something that I think, because again, like we're an investor, so we have no investors, so we own 100% of it, and so, you know, growth, we're not super incentivized to grow fast, just because there are other restaurant operators that are incentivized to grow fast because they have an investor model and they can charge a management fee every time they open up a new restaurant. So more restaurants, more money. And then when it's all done, it's the same as all of us. It's all done. You know, it's over. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at. We're kind of looking to be like, well, a license or franchise deal for this, could this work? Like we're like in the baby stages of it. So
it's interesting. That was on my list too. I like how we're just getting to these naturally, but I've just wondered about, you know, expansion plans, other markets, the franchise model. Have you ever even how much experience have you guys even ever thought about doing a franchise? Because I know you're opening up new concepts. Has it ever been like, there's a franchise that we're interested in just to kind of like case study it and see sort of how the economics work on them, and then how's that played in your thoughts?
Like the one is Chick-fil-A, right? Like I would get rid of all the restaurants if I could just get a Chick-fil-A, because they have a great, I mean, they're always busy.
Michelle thinks Texas Roadhouse. She keeps bugging me. She's like, Texas Roadhouse.
Honestly, it's not bad. Do they do franchising?
I think so. I think a lot of it's owned by the main, but there's like still 100 maybe franchised. I don't know.
Michelle's very smart. That's a good idea.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I think that, like, you know, we have kicked around the idea of doing a franchise too, but like, it's one of those things for us where, again, it's like, I don't know. It'd be like having a boss a little bit, you know? And so you're just kind of like, and then there is a pretty hefty like upfront on almost any worthwhile franchise.
Upfront, and then is it off the top with franchises?
Usually a royalty, like a revenue royalty of like 5% minimum is what I see usually, which
people
is sometimes that's the margin.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Is people think off the top, especially if you're not like a business savvy person, is you're like, oh, it's just this percentage, but that could be a way bigger percentage off the bottom. It could be all of it.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah. Like the better you do, the more you pay. I mean, that's kind of like, and we're in a deal like that with the city. I mean, we pay the city of Edmond like, you know, a royalty. It's public. It's we pay them 5% of revenue, and like we're in the baby stages of seeing if that works. You know what I mean? So we'll see. Like it could not.
That's the one I was going to go to next. So the Lookout, we were just there. It was busy. We were there on Saturday. We tried to go in and get drinks, and it was like packed. We had to sit outside. Looked like it was popping. And I've talked to you about that one, and you've I think been kind of cautious around being like, we're trying this out. You know, we're going to see how it goes. It's for those listening. It's a golf course. They redid it. It's beautiful. It's Kicking Bird Golf Course here in Edmond, and man, it's a great facility. Like the overall facility, your guys' restaurant, as well as just everything they've done there, is awesome. But what have you guys learned, and how's that one just in general? Yeah,
so it's different. I mean, so we work closely with city officials, the director of golf there, and it's definitely different in the fact that like we are used to like kind of like running our restaurants the way we want to run them on the schedule we want to run them at, you know, at the pace that we want to run them at. And this one's like, it's a partnership. Like we're like, you know, we have a new business partner basically, and it's the director of golf and some city officials and stuff like that. And that's like the thing that like we're all learning together. Like it's, you know, it is what it is. There's a lot of people that are like have no understanding of how the business works. And so they kind of think like, oh, it's easy. You just do this. And it's like, a lot of moving pieces. And so there's some learning that we're all kind of doing. We're doing the same with like golf side. Like I don't understand, like I like to golf, but I don't understand like half the stuff they do and the rhyme and reason behind it. But it is like, I believe it'll be a worthwhile project. And I think that, you know, especially with this good weather we've seen in, you know, the colder months are supposed to be colder. Like we have seen, and this is not really ideal. And I'm hoping it's not like this next winter, but it's like when the weather's good, that place is packed. It's great.
Yeah.
And so you don't really want to see that where like, okay, well, if it's above 60 degrees, you're busy. And if it's under 50, you're slow. Like it's not really like nobody would start that restaurant, but
yeah, like if it rained every day in whatever February and March and was freezing, then people wouldn't be out playing golf.
Right.
So
yeah.
They're not going to be in there. And I'm sure they do events and stuff that impacts you guys, like in terms of driving traffic, if they've got some tournament or if they got something, and that's kind of out of your control. So there's probably an element to where it's like you're hoping that they're doing more of those types of things.
Yeah. And and some of those are good and some of those are bad. Honestly, it's weird. It's like, just like, you know, we do like a college deal out there where there's a bunch of college golfers out there, and they just did one. I mean, all the parking's full, and they're all on the course.
They're all bringing beers in their golf bag. They're not going to buy any at the restaurant.
But, you know, we do run that event center as well. So that's also an added thing for us. Like where we have for the first time in our company, we have a banquet chef, and we have an events and catering director that we like kind of run that side with. So a lot of rentable space up there, which is another just additional revenue stream in those slower months, which is helpful. So
back on the franchising side, I mean, that seems like a good what I've noticed is that the Mule has been successful, and then mainly with like you did a new location in Edmonds. So the Lookout's the most recent one. The Mule in Edmonds is second most recent.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And so thoughts on that, going from that kind of tried and true location that we talked about earlier, and it worked really well, and that area grew a lot. That downtown Edmond area is getting better, but it seems like historically maybe wasn't there. I mean, there's some staples that have been there forever, like around the corner. It's like, God, that place has been there forever. But in that new rail yard area, it looks like a lot of places have kind of churned through there.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I don't know if you noticed that, but it seemed like there's been some churn. That's like down the street. How has that one been?
It's been great. And so that was like, I mean, timing wise for that, we opened in December of 2019 there. Obviously, like COVID, horrible timing. Like, you know, 3 months later, we're basically closed for another 3 months, and then it took a minute to build. And interestingly, you know, I grew up in Edmond. You grew up in Edmond, but it's we sort of thought that the Mule had like our reputation would precede us. We would come into admin, oh, we're so glad there's a Mule. Like a good portion of our diners were like, what is this? Like, I've never heard of this before, which is great. Honestly, that's like perfect. That's what we want to hear.
Yeah.
So built business there. And then that was like, you know, like our best store for like a long time. And now like the other Mule's doing really good in its new location, and kind of like they're kind of neck and neck for each other. And but it's like that, you know, we like this idea of like being in a neighborhood or being in a downtown or like being in these cool older buildings. But like I said, when we look at expansion, it's like, I'll use Yukon for an example, Yukon, Oklahoma, which is like, you know, an I-40, you know, thoroughfare where like they have like a little downtown that like has a little building in there for sale and stuff. And like, but when we look, like what's more attractive to us is building a square, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Hideaway does, or like these other people do, and being like, all right, we're going to do it all, like all right, and do it there, like right off I-40. And that's where we're kind of pivoting a little bit. Like when we think about growth is like, we want it to be perfect. And you kind of, when you go into these older spaces, you have to retrofit so much just to make what you want to do work, you know?
Well, it seems like the skill set to do the franchise model, you have to learn some new things. I mean, you'd have to have the processes down. You talked about the margin stuff, and I hate to use the word like more corporate, but you would kind of need to figure out like these parameters and have a playbook. And then it's also, you almost kind of have to be like a venture capitalist where you're like vetting management teams. Like, who is this person that's going to run this? How, you know, what's their background? How do we train? How do we get like everything from training to, you know, all the different things, packaging those up. And that's a lot, it seems like, to do. It's not simple as just like, hey, I'm going to go, here's a franchise license.
Yeah, well said. I mean, and that would, like, the only other way you could do it, I think, is just be fast and loose and just license it. And be like, yeah, here's a menu.
Right.
But then you're like, somebody opens one in your backyard and you're like, okay, well, this is a poor reflection of what I you know, do every day. So, you know, there is a lot of that. We have some connections with some people that we knew from college that like have done this and worked on this kind of stuff. I'm sure you know a handful of these people too, but and they've offered their services to help. But I think, like you're saying, like it would get like corporate. It would just have to get corporate. And ideally we'd start there and not have to like go back and like kind of like just kind of keep our stuff the same and like move forward with something like that, because it would have to be. But, you know,
I wonder.
It's a good point.
I'm assuming there's like companies, like consultants or somebody that probably help folks do this. I would guess I'm assuming there's groups out there that are like, we'll help you franchise your thing.
It's like all my LinkedIn messages are.
Yeah.
It's like, that's like it. It's exclusively like, congrats on your work anniversary, and like, hey, franchise this, franchise. And there's a ton of companies that I think do it. So
I'm sure.
Yeah.
You charge a nice fee for that. What about just the stuff you're seeing trend wise in the restaurant or eatery? Like, I know lately there's been like these cookie places that have exploded, like franchises. I mean, what are like the trends and things you're seeing or paying attention to, whether good or bad? Like, that's interesting. Or like something maybe you thought wouldn't have worked that you're like, dang, that's, and you have to give specifics if you don't want, but just trend wise, what are you guys seeing?
Well, so you mentioned scooters. I'm not talking about scooters, but that idea is, I think, and I don't know if it's like a post, like revolutionizing the industry a little bit post COVID, seeing that like, wow, it's expensive to run a restaurant. So I'm going to put in, there's a place on 23rd and Penn. So I drive by it quite a bit going over to the plaza, and it's like called like Salad a Go-Go or something.
Right.
And it's just a little tiny place where probably 2 or 3 people work, and it's right by a gym, and they just drive. It's just drive through. That's it. There's no walk in. And I think that's part of like, that is like kind of pandemic proof. That's what everybody was doing anyways, right? You're like driving through. It's quick and easy. They can charge less because their overhead, you know, is less. I think that is something that I've seen and kind of like peaked a little bit of like, let's look into like this and like see if like this is something that's gonna like, not that we would start one, but like look at other franchises and stuff of just those smaller like buildings where it's just like 2 or 3 employees, very low maintenance on the management side, on the staffing side. But that's one big thing. I don't know, have you seen any of these places pop up? And like, not Dutch Brothers necessarily, but like kind of like that idea of like small place, drive through, you know, you just swing through and get your stuff and leave. So
my simple brain idea, going back to the Chick-fil-A comment, was always like, just make a chicken place that looks exactly like them. I've told you this before, but looks exactly like them, same color scheme, basically the same menu, and just say open Sundays really big on the side. Or like a coffee place that's like very, you know, Starbucks has a lot of reasons. It's not just popular. It's popular for a reason, but you go there and it's slammed, and it's like, if you had another coffee place that was right by it, I mean, is there like people that do that, like mimic folks and kind of capitalize on a location being good, and they just set up like a similar concept by it?
Well, there's a handful of Raising Cane's that like open up right next to Chick-fil-A, right? Because like they know that like, well, we're going to do this for one day a week because everyone's going to come here wanting chicken.
Yeah.
And we'll be at least the second best option, you know.
I don't know if that would work, but I always just try to figure out like what are other people doing that works, and you don't always have to recreate the wheel. I think people get caught up in like I got to have this business idea that's like no one's ever thought of, and I'm like, well, people probably thought of it. It just probably didn't work. Maybe that's why no one's doing it. Not always, but what about technology? Like how is that? You know, you mentioned COVID multiple times. Now you've got these delivery services. What other tech things in your industry are changing the landscape?
So like the point of sale side, and we talk about point of sales in restaurants, we talk about the computer system that our staff uses. This is like our stuff, and that has grown a lot. And so there is now like a restaurant specific one that we just migrated our whole company over to. Free plug. It's called Toast. And they just track, I mean, they track so much stuff. Like there's so much stuff that we're not even, that like I kind of just, if I have time, I'll sit there and just dig on what they track. And they track everything from like, you know, like a no sale. Like a server goes and they want to open up the cash register, they hit a no sale button. Well, if they do it a lot, it'll kind of ding up, because I mean, what you might be saying is somebody's stealing, right? And so there's that kind of stuff. Like previous too, we had there was nothing tracking this. You know, hourly sales, it would track for us, but it wouldn't track them by item. It wouldn't, you know what I mean? And so there's that kind of stuff where like we're really getting a way broader look of like what we're doing and then what we're selling and how we're like, you can look at the weather that day. How many salads do you sell? It was hot, you sold more salads. Oh, it was cold, you sold more, you know, soups and warmer items. Like that kind of stuff is like extremely helpful, you know? And then since it's all cloud-based, which it should be, then, you know, less crashes, less, stuff that we have to deal with on the day-to-day of like POS systems crashing. We're not transactional. We cannot be open, you know. Pull out the knuckle buster and try to run people's cards. They're going to be like, please don't touch my credit card with that, you know.
Right.
So there's that. That's like the biggest thing for us is like point of sale system and then integrating that into like our payroll system, which we have done. So then they all talk to each other. And it just makes way more sense. So
does it do like scheduling and stuff too? Is it all kind of in one?
If there's an integration, they have it. It's kind of one of those. So it's like we run our scheduling, payroll, and point of sale all through there. And that's been, you know, we started with point of sale, got that going. Then we added scheduling. Then we added payroll. It was just like a whole thing of like exactly. We got upsold. But then also it's like extremely convenient. One login for everything. And we get, you know, all 4 of the restaurants at our fingertip. You know, like I can look on an app. I go to this Toast app on my phone and I can just like pull it up, refresh it, and I can see like live sales by person. So I can see like, okay, like looking at the lookout, because I haven't a lot lately, because like sometimes they just get slammed and they're like, we need help. And so I'll just look and I can see like, okay, I'm going to run up there real quick or whatever. So it's nice.
Well, it's interesting because like we did, you know, before we went through the merger recently, we had some tech that we were developing and now it's getting rolled out into the new combined company. And similar kind of deal where it's like, you look at it and a lot of stuff's being done in spreadsheets. A lot of things just aren't being tracked. It's like traditional accounting systems are kind of just like lumping things together. And it's like, well, we have all this information, like no one's really tracking it. It's really cumbersome. The reason why is because like, it's kind of hard to do. It's like the reason why the old accounting systems did it this way is because that's the easy button. It's just like you lump it into these categories, push it through. It's a high volume of transactions. And so it seems like with your business, man, there's a bunch of stuff you could track.
A ton,
you can track a lot.
Well, and I think it's a great point too. Is like what you guys were doing and what you guys, you know, I listened back on the guy that you all merged with, and I listened back on this pod you guys did with him. Is really insightful, and I think that like a thing that it's really easy to do if you have your own company in any way is like it's not broken. I'm not going to fix it. But then like that attitude just kind of leads to like things being broken for a super long time, and like with like technology getting better and with like, you know, bringing our company, like what I say, like we didn't bring our company like the 21st century. We probably brought it back into the 20th. Like there's still a lot we can do, but it's like, we always have to be looking at like, yes, there's a higher cost associated with what we're doing now. However, like we do believe that like we're making that back, you know? So
yeah, well, it could be it's probably the right move for the franchise. Like if you're really trying to think about ideas for future growth, like having all those metrics and having that standardized formula seems like that would be a good first step to getting all the stuff calculated
for sure.
And figured out.
For sure.
What about like the delivery service stuff from COVID? Is that still a meaningful?
It is, yeah. And you know, it's not as it's kind of tapering. Like you can kind of see it. Like more people are coming in, but like it was like stayed really substantial. Like it was at one point, like even after we're like fully open and like everyone's fine to go out to eat, like it was 30%. It became 30% of our like total revenue, which is crazy.
That's huge.
Yeah, it was huge. I think we're coming down, but I mean, to go is still. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, to go's easy," you know, and they'll just do that. And I think that's like changed the mindset of the diner a little bit. And I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is nice. We just pick it up and eat at home." I didn't know we could do this, which is again, we prefer to have them in house, but there's something too, just like a to-go order that's really easy for us, to do. So, they're like, we view that honestly as a marketing fee for us. Like I view being on those platforms as that's a marketing fee because like their take is 15%. So it's like, okay, we'll probably paying to be on there, but if somebody's surfing around, they just get a meal and then they come in and eat. We'll see it later. So
yeah, and so the delivery fees goes to the driver. The app company takes a fee off the net, or how does that? I don't even know how that works.
Yeah, so they just like, it's just like somebody rings in a $10 sandwich, $1.50 goes to DoorDash, and then whatever the tip is, that's between the person that ordered it and the the dasher or the Uber Eats driver. But yeah, it's interesting, and I think like we're at 15. A lot of restaurants are at 30%, and I just can't believe that people do it because again, I view it as marketing because it kind of is what it is.
So people run specials on there, free delivery, whatever. I guess the restaurant's ultimately eating whatever that special is.
Yeah, so we would do that. So we would like come in and be like, all right, we want to run a 20% off. Like Tuesdays aren't that busy right now. Let's run 20% off on DoorDash on Tuesdays. Gets people to get some good food. Hopefully they'll swing back in and dine in with us, or keep using DoorDash is fine too. It's not the end of the world. So
for sure, you've mentioned marketing a couple times. You guys have done good. You got pretty big social media followings. I mean, I think like I was looking at earlier because I was just kind of Googling a little bit before this, and like the Mule was like 20K or something. Instagram and your Twitter followings high on these things. How much have you guys tried to? I think I talked about this one time, but how much have you focused on the building those presence versus how much of it came organically, just kind of just happened? But do you guys put a lot of emphasis on that stuff?
We do, and we have like we have a part-time person that kind of does the Mule account and some of that stuff, and it's